during as well. All right, Fran, we are good to go.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 11th Connecticut Paid Leave Board of Directors meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order. It is 9:03. Amber, would you kindly take attendance?
Sure, thank you, Fran. Ava Bermuda Zimmerman. I do not believe Ava has joined us yet. Isha Canada. Isha, are you with us?
I just joined.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Adrienne Cochran.
Present.
Britt Marie Cole Johnson, I do not believe has joined us yet. Daryl Dzinski.
Present.
Michelle Gilman.
Present.
Sheila will not be joining us today. Sal Luciano. Do not believe Sal has joined us. Alex Marcelino has not yet joined us. Fran Pastori.
Present.
John Scott.
Here.
Mike Soltis.
Here.
Molly Weston Williamson.
Here.
Holly Williams will not be joining us today, and Justin Zartman.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. Fran, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Amber. I'd like to thank and welcome members of the public who are joining us today. And Senator Kushner, thank you for being here as well. First order of business is we are going to review and approve the minutes of July 14th, which were distributed last week. Are there any corrections or further discussions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, John. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mike abstains.
Thank you, Mike. Any the motion, any abstentions?
I abstain
Thanks,
as well.
Mike. Okay, thank you. All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so as many of you know, the team has been working with an actuarial firm to assess the strength of the paid leave trust fund. Spring Group has prepared a presentation summarizing that work, and I would like to ask the representative from Spring Group to share their findings with the board.
Hi there, good morning. My name is Harindra Sebastian, and I'm a senior actuary here at Spring Consulting Group. With me is my colleague Audrey Wang as well, who's also an actuary at our firm. I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll go through the results that we've put together. Could someone please confirm that you can see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll just flip to the next slide. So the agenda that we have, and I'll run through this relatively quickly, but feel free, we do have time at the end for questions as well. Just a quick introduction of who we are to everyone who didn't hear me speak before. A little bit of background on the work we've done. We'll talk about the results themselves, go through a little bit of detail around the key assumptions and methods. We'll talk about a reserve estimate that was developed as of June 30th. And then we'll talk a bit about the fund solvency as well. So just a bit about Spring. Spring is part of Alera Group, which is a national firm that deals with all kinds of risk consulting and so on. We as a firm provide strategic consulting and actuarial services to employers, insurance companies, financial service providers, state and government entities, as well as captive owners as well. And more specific to this, we do have some specific expertise in paid family and medical leave programs, having worked with several states and other organizations in this space. The purpose of this discussion and the work we've done for this meeting is related to reviewing the solvency of the paid leave trust fund as of June 30th. So to do that, what we've done is we're presenting the actual financial results as of June 30th. And that includes all the plan activities, so contributions and as well as expenses. But then we also show the fund balance and the solvency. We'll have a bit of a discussion around that. And then we also have a 3-year projection of financial activity and fund balance as well to support this discussion as well. So these results shown here, and I hope that you can see it. And if you can, just let me know, and I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. But these results are intended to provide you with the current reported results as well as the 3-year projection. Each of these columns, the first column has an 18-month period, so it's an 18-month period, January 2021 to June 2022, of the reported results. The second column shows the results that are for the projected period, July 2022 to June 2023, so fiscal year 2023. And then the next 2 columns show the following 2 years of results as well. Each of these sections, the first section talks about revenue. So we have our revenue figures here. The second section is all the expenses, and revenue minus expenses. We have the net activity for the reported period as well as in the projection period. And then below that, we show the fund balance based on that net activity. Okay. And I'll start at the top, just go through the reported results pretty quickly. We have payroll contributions. So on a paid basis, actual contributions received 518.8 million. Because of the 30-day of the 1-month grace period, really, the contributions for the fiscal year not yet received, so that would have been received as of the end of June, as of the end of July, for the period that ends June 30th, is another 113 million. So total contributions add up to about 632 million estimated. Investment income was about 1 million, so total revenue, as we defined it here, is 633 million. In terms of expenses, we have paid claims, about 102 million, and then a reserve estimate of 40 million. And we'll get into a little bit more detail on this reserve estimate in a moment. But in fact, essentially what this represents is claims that have happened already, that have been incurred, but have not yet been paid. The full amount in respect of those claims has not yet been paid. So it's still assigned to this reporting period, but some of those claims are still outstanding. So we've accounted for that as a reserve for future payments in respect of claims that have happened already. So that in total is 142 million. And then we have other expenses. So administration of 19.4 million for the authority, and then claims administration for AFLAC 13.3 million. There's a seed capital repayment of 3.8 million as well. So total expenses, or the subtotal of the other expenses, is 36.5 million, and the total expenses is 178.5 million. So net activity, if you take the 633 million minus the 178.5 million, we end up with 454.6 million for the period. Okay. That also is the fund balance. If looking at the last row down here, because this is reporting since inception. We have the actual fund balance as of June 30th of 381.3. And then after you account for contributions that have not yet been received, 113.3 million that I mentioned right up top here, as well as the reserve for claims that have been incurred but not yet paid of 40 million, which I mentioned here, we end up with the 454 million, 54.6 million for the year. Okay. Now, looking at the projection period, and I'll go through this briefly now that I've kind of framed what we're showing here. And one thing to keep in mind is these projection periods are all 12-month periods, whereas the reporting period is an 18-month period. Okay, so total contributions anticipated 478 million for this fiscal year 2023, going up to 500 million in fiscal year 2024 and 517.8 million in fiscal year 2025. Investment income sitting at around 4 to 5 million in each of these years. So total revenue is about 482.2 million in fiscal year 2023, under this projection, in this projection, and then 505 million in fiscal year 2004, and 522 million in fiscal year 2025. You can see the expenses here as well. So we will have a lot more paid claims, as you might expect, now that we've started to pay claims. And in total, including the reserve, we'll be at 364.6 million. So this is, there are two components here. One, all the claims that that we are holding a reserve for, we expect to have paid those during this year and then release this reserve. But then we also expect to create a new reserve for incurred claims during this period, this fiscal year period, that we would not have paid for during that period, that are paid for in the following year. So that's the 51.4 million that is noted here. So overall, in total, 364.6 million. And you can see that number growing to 420 million and 464.7 million in the following years. And then we have the other expenses, as noted. We have the other expenses as noted here, of 47.9 million, 47.7 million, 49.1 million, so roughly or just under 50 million on these other expenses, driven by the administration for the authority, as well as AFLAC's claims administration costs as well. Okay. Net activity, you can see is 69.7 million for this projected first year, 36.9 million for the second year, the fiscal year 2024, and 9 million for fiscal year 2025. The result of this is that we do see that the fund balance growing by the overall net activity. So we started as of June 30th at 454.6 million. That's going to 524 million, and then up to 561.2 million and 570.2 million. Okay. I will highlight this, that the projections are based on a set of assumptions that were developed in looking at the state's own data, as well as other states' experience data as well. And part of our process will be to continue to refine the assumptions and look at sensitivity of alternate assumptions as we look at these projections more and more. And because the program is so new in the state of Connecticut, and we don't have a lot of credible experience yet, we had to rely heavily on other state experience to make these projections. And so as we get more and more data, as this program matures, we will be able to update the assumptions and refine these projections quite a bit to be very much specific to the state of Connecticut's own, to reflect the state of Connecticut's own experience and what we would truly expect to occur, assuming that we have a better view of the past. Okay. With that, I'll jump to the next page. I think I've covered this in full detail. This graphic is intended to illustrate the same results that we showed previously. So we have the revenue line in blue. So for this 18-month period, 633.1 million, going to 482.2 million in the projected fiscal year 2023, 505.2 million and 522.8 million in the following 2 years. This orange line indicates the spending, the expense levels, as you can see here. So it's 178.5 million in the first year, but it grows as we pay more claims to over 400 million in the second, in fiscal year 2023, and 468 million in fiscal year 2024, and so on. And then the bars represent the fund balance, closing fund balance. So the 454.6 million is the same number you would have seen in the prior page. And then you can see that that's growing a little over 500 million in the next year, and so on. Okay. I'll make a few comments on the assumptions. I think I already covered the fact that for the most part, we are relying on, particularly in making our claims projections, on historical data from other states, because we don't have a lot of mature claims data for the state of Connecticut yet. But we will, and we will rely more and more on that data as we get more and more credible data and claims experience. In terms of the contribution projections, we do have a fair amount of data on that. So those projections are based on the contributions that were received in prior quarters, factoring in estimated changes in the population, wage growth, and so on. The one comment that I made previously that I'll just want to reiterate is that we do account for this reserve estimate, if you will, for the grace period that's there in place. So, for example, as of June 30th, there is still time in July to make contributions, so that we have that reserve estimate for that piece as well. We do have an assumption for investment income, actual maybe a little bit more or less, and that will be reflected in the results and in future projections as well. I mentioned, made the comments about on the claims projections, and to be more specific on that, we do look at the likelihood of claims occurring, what we would call the incidence rate, how long those claims will be for, based on the type of claim that they are, and that what I call it the duration assumption, if you will. And then how much will be paid as well. So how many people will go on claim, how long will those claims be for, and how much will be paid. And that's a function of several assumptions, including the benefit level itself, which depends on the minimum wage, and so on. So we've reflected all of that, and then we also have other assumptions around the covered population, including anticipated changes in private plan take-up rates as well on private plans, which we're anticipating to increase a little next year. And then we also have the expense projections, which I talked about, which we have the breakout for, and that's based on the CTPL budget for future years and anticipated increases in the budget expenses. So I just want to make a few comments on the assumptions. There are further details in the appendix and in a formal report that we provide. One important piece that impacts our financials that I mentioned before was this 40 million reserve that was estimated here. So this is a reserve for claims that were incurred but not yet paid. For whatever reason, the claim itself has happened, but we just haven't made the payments yet, but we do need to hold funds aside for those payments. And in respect of that, we looked at it as three different components. Claims that have been approved, they're open. Maybe they're a few weeks into the claim, but there's still several weeks remaining. So those are what we call the case reserves, for claims that are approved with outstanding payments remaining. There's a set of claims that are pending, so they have not yet been adjudicated. We know about the claim, they've submitted the paperwork and so on, but it hasn't been approved yet, and hasn't resulted in actual payments out the door yet. But we do need to set aside money based on assumptions around that. And then the third item is claims where we don't know about it yet. Generally, workers have about 45 days to submit claims. Sometimes there might be some exceptions to that, but in general, there's 45 days to submit a claim. And so there's a bunch of claims that we haven't even received any data around yet. So we have estimated a reserve in respect of those claims as well. And all of these, so in total, we estimated 40 million of reserves, 10 million for the first item, the case reserves, 23 million for the pending claims reserve, and for the claims that have been incurred but not yet reported, 7 million. So that ended up with 40 million. All of these, again, as we get more and more experience, when we look at this again in future quarters, we'll refine the assumptions, have better estimates. But we did have enough data to at least come up with a reasonable estimate based on various actuarial methods for the reserves as of June 30th. Okay. The last item that I wanted to cover in detail is the fund solvency. Okay, so this is I think an important aspect. Okay, based on what we looked at as the reserve and looking at the fund balance. We set about looking at setting up targets, and then under several components here. And then we looked at what the actual metrics are relative to those targets. Okay, the first item here is a reserve compared to the net fund balance. And I will point out there is more detail in the following page. I'll just talk about it here. So this is a view looking at how the reserve compares to the fund balance. Is the reserve adequate? And if the reserve, if what we end up needing to hold as a reserve needs to be a lot higher, for example, is the fund balance sufficient to cover that? In this case, the reserve is very small relative to the fund balance. So it certainly meets the target of 3-to-1. So I think that is sufficient when you think about the fund balance and the solvency of that fund. The second aspect is looking at the contributions relative to the fund balance. And again, this is intended to indicate if our revenue, how that compares to the fund balance. And this metric, we ended up at 0.9-to-1, which is less than our target. We set out 3-to-1, so that is determined to meet the target as well. And then we looked at, okay, if we have adverse losses over 1 year versus compared to the fund balance, how would that look? We ended up at 0.3-to-1, which is all less than the target set of 0.5-to-1. So that was determined to meet these targets. And the intent here is to monitor these metrics, and we have three metrics that we want to keep monitoring over time. And then to the extent that one of these metrics looks like we're above the target, we would say, okay, we need to look at this further, and that might pull up some red flags to say, okay, we may not be solvent, or we may not meet the target solvency levels, and we may need to do something about that. But at this point, because the fund is quite a bit higher compared to these metrics, it was determined that overall the fund balance meets the target funding metrics. Okay. This page just provides a little bit more detail of what I outlined. I think I covered it at a high level, and then be happy to respond to any questions as well. And then just in summary, so the net activity for the period, January 1, 2021 through to June 30th, 2022 was 454.6 million, which is also the fund balance because this is from inception to June 30th. And looking at the fund balance, it did meet the target funding metrics. So that was an important point to cover. And based on the current assumptions, and again, these will be reviewed and refined over time, the fund is expected to grow a little bit over the next 3 years, as projected revenue is in fact higher than expenses. So we do want to continue to monitor it. We want to factor in unexpected economic changes like COVID and anything else that might impact the fund balance, of course. And we do have a bit of a process to monitor this fund balance regularly, and every quarter I'll be reporting on that as well. So it is at this point solvent and meets the target metrics. So I think we're good for now, but we'll continue to monitor this very closely because it is so important. Okay. That I'll move on to the question section. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very thorough and informative. And is there any discussion or questions that anyone has?
I have some questions, Madam Chair. Can you go back to the first screen of your financials, please? So we've seen previous actuarial studies that I've questioned whether or not we've been extracting too much money via the tax into our system. And now suddenly we're seeing very different numbers that would imply that we're spot on with what we're taking in as a tax. I guess my first question, if the reported income or revenue of 633 million for this year, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. So you're saying that the reported revenue is 633 million for the first half of 2022. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
No. So this is an 18-month period, January 2021 to
21 to 22. Okay.
Oh, yeah. So we
So
had a year where there were no claims.
Okay. So if you were to make that just a full 12 months of the previous year, what is that number? So for the January 21 to December of 2021, what was that number?
John,
Yes.
if you're asking how much what 12 months of contributions were on a
Right.
cash basis, it was about 518 point. No, I'm sorry. That's the 18 months. I take that back. I'm sorry. It was about $412.3 million.
412. Okay. So what how do we justify going from 412 to 482? I mean, where are we getting 70 million more in revenue? What's going to change in the economy that's going to bring us in $70 million more in 23, and then almost $100 million more in the next 2 years?
So I think I can comment on that. So we do have some assumptions around growth in wages and so on. Let me just point you to that in the appendix. So we do have a 4% growth in salary that's been assumed. And then we also do expect the minimum wage growth to be factored in as well, which affects who qualifies, as well as how much revenue is going to be coming. So the population covered would change based on that. And then you do have more revenue coming in as a result as well.
All right, going back to that first slide, just wanted to touch on the claim side. So we're 6 months in, we've had 142 million. If you multiply that by 2, you're at 284 million. I mean, obviously it's still kind of a wild card, but how do you go from 284 million to almost $100 million more in claims in your projections in the forward years?
Yep, that's a good question. So we do have assumed increases in incidence levels because we looked at your data. It was a lot lower than what we were seeing across other states based on mature populations and other groups that had, after adjusting for this plan differences and so on. And what we saw was that, you know, your initial data and certainly the emerging data was lower in terms of the claims paid and so on. So when we extrapolated that forward, we didn't want to just assume, you know, that everything will be as good as it is right now, just because your data is not very credible. It is the inception of the program, so that has to be factored in as well. So for the projection, for the purpose of the projection, we did assume increases in the number of people making claims effectively. We have outlined the assumptions in the appendix again as well. At least you can see this here, for example. So for each type of leave, we've got an assumption here, and then even for the projection period, we do assume an increase relative to where you started off, and then we expect that to go up as well, at least in this projection based on these assumptions. And this is based on looking at other states' data, as well as looking at your data. So we looked at your data, we see that it's very low in terms of the claims incidence that's driving the lower claims paid. But we also need to account for the fact that that may not last forever because it's a new program and because we are seeing a lot more incidents in other states for similar programs. So we accounted for that in the projection that we have shown. Now, it may not come to pass, to be fair. It may be much lower, but it also might be a lot higher. And that's where we want to continue to monitor the experience and see and refine the assumptions going forward
How does this growth in claims experience compare to private market plans that have been out there for a while, and what their claims experience has been?
So your claims experience has been lower, and certainly was lower even compared to what was previously projected. So the growth itself, I think, would be higher compared to what we would see in other plans. But it is heavily dependent on what the conditions of that specific program, how it was communicated, and so on. So it's really hard to say at the end of the day where it will land. But in terms of the trajectory of increase in incidence rate, it is what we've assumed here is higher than what I would see, or I would typically see with private plans.
And another question I had for you is with reserves. I work in the property casualty insurance world, and I understand you put reserves on a fire or a liability loss, and then in forward years you write those off, so that we realized we put a $200,000 reserve on a fire loss that ended up we only paid out $100,000, so we put $100,000 back as a chargeback, so to speak. So how do we account for? We're obviously setting aside between $40 and $65 million for reserves. How do we account for the chargebacks that we ended up spending $20 million instead? So how do we put that back into our budget in the way you project this stuff?
Dave?
So, John, if you look at the schedule, what you'll see is he's got reserves for claims incurred at the end of the year and claims not yet incurred at the start of the year. So every year we back out last year's number and start with a new number. So we're not double counting. So we're constantly, at least on an annual basis, if not more often, reassessing what that reserve is. So we'll back out the old one and put in the new one, and that will adjust it as necessary.
All right.
Yeah, the thing with these claims is it is shorter term in nature, right? So within the next year, whatever was held should be released or used. So at least to the extent that this 40 million is either too high or too low, we'll see that come through within the year. So we'll release that reserve immediately, I guess, in the next year.
So we have, if someone wants to file a claim with paid leave, they have to do it within a certain window, correct? It has to be like 6 months. I guess I'm trying to back into this. How do we get to $40 million? So if basically $40 million of claims that would come in the month of December that we would start working on after the adjudication in the first of the next year?
So
is that how this works?
So there's a few components to the 40 million. There is the piece where there are claims that are not yet known, right? So that's, you account for that as, so there's a 45-day window. We did look at it by month and assign the likelihood of any more claims coming in and how much that might look like to assess that reserve. And that actually came out to be 7 million. There are a bunch of claims where, because it's not just a single payment, unlike maybe a property and casualty type insurance payment, this is a long-term payment over potentially 12 weeks, for example. So if somebody has only used up 2 weeks, there's still, another potential, let's say 10 weeks benefit still out there for a claim that has already happened, right? So there's a reserve in respect of those claims, the case reserve. And then there's a bunch of claims that have been submitted. We already kind of know about them. They just haven't been adjudicated, and we haven't said yes, approved or not approved. But we know how much it is for example. So we can make an assessment on that. And that actually turned out to be the largest component of the 40 million at 23 million.
All right, that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just, yeah, back to the net activity. Just to, I'm sorry, yes, thank you. For the net activity, can you just briefly walk through that projection? Because I know that that's also a very important concept for us to all understand from 454 to 9? You know, what does that mean?
Yes, okay. So the 454 in the first reporting period is high primarily because we had a whole year of effectively getting contributions but not making payments. Payments only began at the beginning of this year, whereas the contributions began at the beginning of the prior year. So that would be higher. The remaining periods, the primary aspect of this is that the claims are going up a little bit faster based on our projection approach relative to the revenue that we have. So we have contributions, you can see here, of 478 going up by 12 million to 500 million. 22 million to 500 million, and then up to 517 million. Whereas the claims, on the other hand, and then we have a little bit of investment income, which is roughly around 4 to 5 million. The claims, on the other hand, are going up, assumed to go up a little bit higher, and that is based on the assumptions that we made that I just talked about, where we are assuming a pretty steep increase in incidence levels. So the claims the number of claims that are happening, we're expecting that to go up, at least based on the assumptions that we made. Now, those assumptions are, I'd say, because we didn't have a lot of data for your plan specifically, they are based on a much broader set of data, and that might be a little bit higher or a little bit lower, and that because of that, these numbers can change a fair bit based on the emerging experience. I mean, that's why I want to certainly monitor your experience and see how that compares to what we've assumed and make adjustments along the way. Okay, but we do have the claims going up, as you can see here, for example. So the first period, 142 to 364, that's, overall, we're looking at a small period of claims data versus a 12-month period, right? So 6 months versus 12 months. But beyond that, we do see pretty large increases. So in this case, we're going from 364 million to 420 million, which is a lot larger increase relative to the increase in contributions that we've assumed in this for this projection. So that's why we see the net activity going down over time, because we have contributions that are going up at a lower rate relative to the claims experience that's going up at a higher rate. And as this claims experience goes up, we would expect to be closer to the revenue figures than where we were to start off with in the first few years. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Thanks, Beryl and Harindra. Anybody else? Any questions for Harindra? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, Erin, will you please lead us in a discussion on the resolution regarding signatory authority of the CEO and the authority staff?
Certainly, thank you so much. I'm just going to pull up the resolution so that you can all review it. This was sent to you before the meeting as well. As you may recall, last time we did the board executed a resolution for Andrea. It was a long time ago, and it was before we had any staff. It was actually even before we even had a budget. So times have changed. We have a lot of more people and a lot more activities going on. And it doesn't make sense, in our opinion, to have Andrea be signing off on every single $15, $250 expense that we have. So our request to you is twofold. It's one, just to update Andrea's authority to reference the fact that, yes, we do have a budget that we didn't have in 2020. Two, to give me authority to enter into contracts or sign agreements for non-budget expenses of less than $5,000, consistent with the statute, or for budgeted expenses up to $25,000, just to have an alternative for Andrea. And further, to be consistent with the way state agencies work, to create a designated alternative, which would be me at this point, in the event of the CEO's absence or incapacity, so that we don't have to go back to the board in the event that Andrea is out of the country or is having a medical procedure. This is basically modeled after what commissioners do with their deputy commissioners. And then finally, we want to give Dave and his team in the finance unit the ability to process routine budgeted expenses of less than 5,000, consistent with existing policies to allow for segregation of duties. But again, Andrea has a lot on her plate, and we feel this is an appropriate and reasonable way to take off some of those more routine responsibilities. So we would like your approval to adopt this resolution. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Erin. That makes perfect sense to me.
I do have a question, just with changing the responsibilities of signing checks and things like that. Is there a person who does the reconciliations who is not authorized to sign checks or make deposits or withdrawals from the checking account?
Yes,
I'm
we
gonna
have.
hand that over to Dave.
Yes, sorry
Yeah.
to cut. Sorry to cut everybody off.
And we don't use checks. We don't
Okay.
accept them. We don't issue them. No.
Right. That's one of the benefits of being a remote agency. But anyway, the short answer is yes, we do have an individual in finance who does the reconciliation, and she does not have any authority at all to make any payments on her own without proper authorization or approval from somebody else. So yes.
That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the signatory authority of the CEO and the Connecticut paid leave staff as requested?
Moved. Scott.
Thank you, John. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I know there were a couple there. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries, and we are going to move right along to Andrea. Andrea, would you kindly lead us in the discussion on the contract for the fund recovery software solution?
Well, good morning, everyone. So to begin with, our statute and our plan of operations authorizes me to approve expenses that are only up to $5,000. And this may seem like a similar discussion that we had at our last board meeting, where we are coming back to you to ask for your permission for a specific expense. That plan of operation also specifies that we can sole source, meaning that we can use a specific vendor under certain circumstances. And although I technically have the authority to do that, the amount of money that we're looking to spend with this particular vendor was one that I felt I needed to come back and talk to the board about so that we could have a full discussion about it. Later on, in a few minutes, you're going to hear from Jennifer on our staff in accounting and finance about how much she's been able to collect from employers who had not yet registered. And this process that I'm going to speak about is to assist her in doing that in a more automated way. So we are looking for a vendor that will allow us to automate the collections process for employers who have just most recently registered or employers who have not been compliant, and we finally have gotten them to register and pay. This process, or this cloud collection, as the collection process, as we call it, is actually a pretty specific area of expertise. There are not a lot of vendors that do this work in this area. We made every attempt to follow the procurement procedures of the state, and I can tell you at this point, Lori, I should say, spoke to or made connection with at least 6 vendors looking for specific things that we needed from them. One of which is the ability to work in the Salesforce environment, which is the environment in which we work. So that alone limited the number of vendors that we can work with. And then after a significant amount of due diligence and speaking to every single one of these vendors, they either wanted to sell us products that were much richer in terms of what they offered, or they didn't offer anything that was compatible at all with anything that we have or what it is that we wanted to do. So I really do have to give Lori an enormous amount of credit. She spent the last 3 months with Erin and I just sort of prodding her, saying, go back, look, go back, call someone else, see who can do this, so that we could come to you and tell you that we did look at all of the vendors that we think were appropriate for this space. And the one vendor that continues to be, I think, most appropriate is Cloud Collect. So that is the one that can deliver the service that we want. They can do it in the time period that we need. They can work on the Salesforce platform, and we will not be essentially oversold a product that does many more things that we honestly don't need it to do, because we have a lot of those procedures already in place with other software that we have with other vendors. Now, Cloud Collect will cost us about $122,000 to begin with, and it's a $69,000 annual maintenance fee. We will need $50,000 to purchase it, and then we will need another $72,000 in order to customize it. Again, this is something that is usually operational, but because it's a significant amount of money that we will be spending on one vendor without really having the benefit of the usual RFP and procurement process, because there really is no one else to go to for this after having done all our due diligence, we wanted to get the board's approval to move forward with this process. And Dave, I don't know if you wanted to add anything more about fund recovery, or Walter about how this will assist us in the work that we're doing.
Thanks, Andrea. I'd say it will really add and help us to keep track of employers and how much they owe and how long it's been since they paid, and the ability to keep notes and keep tracks and keep contacts and things like it. Just helps it become very organized in terms of our fund recovery efforts. And that's really the big value add to Cloud Collect.
I'm sorry, Fred, I was going to say I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Questions, anyone? All right, let's have a motion. May I have a motion to authorize the authority to enter into a contract for a fund recovery software solution?
So moved.
Thank you, Michelle. A second?
Second.
John, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, excellent. The motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Michael,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael, would you please lead us in a discussion on the proposed revisions to the policies?
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. I'm here to talk about 3 adjustments or additional policies that we would like to include in our consolidated policy documents. And as folks know, that's sort of the robust series of policies that captures a lot of how the program or the authority interacts with the public, employers or employees, and claimants. So these would be 3 categories of changes or additional items that we'd like to add to that. The request today is to be able to post those for notice and comment, and then eventual adoption at a later board meeting. I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
You can see your screen.
Thank you so much. Nothing too amazing on the screen. It's just something to look at so you're not staring at my face as I ramble for the next 10 minutes. So these would be, there's 3 sets of policies we would hope to adopt. The first category involves how sole proprietors or self-employed individuals who are participating, how the program works with them. A lot of this is just revision to what we felt were existing rules, just kind of clarifying them, but then there are a couple additional items. Not on this list. Oh, I forgot to mention. I hope everyone received the actual redlined versions of the changes from Amber earlier this week. If not, please let me know. This is sort of capturing those at a high level. There were some changes that were typos or changes to citation format in the language that's not captured here, but they didn't drive intent at all. The first category of changes for sole proprietors and self-employed individuals it concerns the effective dates for enrolled individuals. This is really just revising what we already had adopted, just making it clear what we meant, because I think we use terms like the coverage effective date, which isn't very useful when we have contributions and benefit amounts that behave slightly differently. So this is really just capturing how contributions work very clearly, how benefit eligibility works very clearly. That's the first category. Second category involves early termination without penalty. Our statute says that sole props and self-employed individuals who enroll in the program enroll for a period of 3 years, with kind of a 1-year re-up after that if they choose to keep with us or don't tell us they want to terminate. And we had previously indicated that we would allow them to withdraw, but potentially with a penalty. These would be rules that would allow them to not have penalties applied to them if they withdraw early. The first rule is the same language we have for any other penalties, either in our statute or other policies, the ability for the authority to waive those penalties if against equity and good conscience. So just trying to keep alignment across penalties as they apply to sole proprietors and self-employed individuals. The second part of that relates to, we received a lot of requests from sole props or self-employed individuals who enrolled and didn't realize what they were doing, thought they had to enroll, didn't realize it was voluntary. And we don't want to force them to stay with us for 3 years, and if they don't really want to participate or if it's not a benefit for them. So allowing retroactive termination, basically pretend as if they hadn't enrolled, give them their money back. If they received any benefits from us for paid leave, they would have to pay that back. We just kind of say, go back to the beginning, no harm, no foul. The third category is similar. This is individuals who meant to enroll, wanted to enroll, were happy with the program, but then they lost eligibility. One example, unlike sort of rank and file covered employees, sole proprietors and self-employed individuals must reside in the state. So if they were residing here, enrolled, and then they moved out of Connecticut, we don't want to force them to stay in the program. So they would be, if they can prove to us they no longer reside here, we would allow them to withdraw. Second category, if they're closing their business. Similar to any other employer who either closed their business or doesn't have employees in Connecticut any longer, we have an option for them to kind of close down the registration, having a similar process for sole proprietors or self-employed individuals. The default position for either of these situations, they can continue to stay in the program for that 3-year period, report $0 in income and pay no money, wait till the end of the 3-year period and close at that time. But this is really meant for, there's no reason why if they just want to close their books and end the connection with us as of the date of their lack of eligibility, we don't want to force them to stay with us. So that's kind of the third category. Fourth category of policies for individuals who were enrolled, elected to withdraw from the program, and now want to re-enroll. We did want to add a waiting period, essentially, for that to happen. It's basically equal to what will be the base period for any claims they file for that second period. This is just designed to protect us if a sole proprietor, self-employed individual wants to avoid paying contributions on a payment they're going to receive, but then have it apply to their later claim. For example, if you're enrolled with us, you realize you're about to get a giant payment for work you've done. We don't want you withdrawing from the program, receiving that payment, not paying contributions to that payment, re-enrolling, and now that payment is part of your benefit amount. So just kind of protecting us from that. It's probably a pretty narrow window that this will ever apply to, but just it's a little bit of risk mitigation on that. The last category for sole props and self-employed individuals is probably the most important because it really comes up on every claim they file. How do they prove wages to us? They're likely not going to be in the Department of Labor wage database that we use for every other covered individual. So we just wanted to more accurately define what we would use. The preferred option is Schedule C tax forms that they filed. They can provide it to us. Another option is Schedule SE, very similar information. And then we officially identify what line we're looking at that is the closest analogy to wages received by the individual. Part of that also is there's certain assumptions that would have to be made if we receive these. These tax forms are likely on an annual basis. The base period is sort of a rolling period that, other than claims filed in the second quarter, likely will not align exactly with the tax forms they provide. So just allowing the authority to make assumptions either about prior tax years, the current tax year, or distribute the income on an annual basis across the quarters. So just having that as an option for us when it comes to providing income. those were the changes or additional policies we had reflecting sole proprietors, self-employed individuals. I'm going to go quickly to the next one, but I'll obviously take questions at the end. I know we have a busy schedule, so I don't want to pause yet. Holidays and shutdowns, this is really just trying to provide more detail about what we originally intended. And it's really just about keeping us as in line as much as possible with FMLA, whether it's Connecticut FMLA or federal FMLA. There isn't a lot of guidance out there for some of these pieces, but we did try to track down as much research to make sure we defined it as close as possible to how FMLA works. The first sort of rule is for holidays or shutdowns where the holiday or shutdown applies to the entire regular work schedule for the employee for that week or greater. I think I put an example in the policy document. If you normally work Monday to Friday, you're trying to take paid leave from Monday to Friday, but your company shut down from Sunday to Saturday, at no point during that week would you have been expected to work had you not been on leave, and therefore no benefits would be payable. That's the same rules that FMLA applies. Second category, this is where an individual was approved for a full week, and for some part of that week, there is a holiday or shutdown. As an example, if you're on continuous leave for, say, 12 weeks, the entire time you're on leave, and in the middle of week 5, there happens to be a holiday on a Monday, and you work for a schedule that's more than Monday normally, you won't even notice the change. You'll still pay for that full week on that holiday week. You'll see the same exact paid leave check each week. You won't even notice that holiday exists. Once again, that's very much in line with the regulations around FMLA. The third category is the most complex one. That was actually the hardest to find detail. We were able to track down some information about it. And it involves a situation where someone is on paid leave for part of the week, they're working for part of the week, and there's a holiday that's less than the week. I think the example I use in the policy document is you normally work Monday to Friday, you happen to be on paid leave on Monday and Tuesday, you work Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. In a normal situation, your benefit amount would be 2/5 of a week. You are on paid leave for 2 days out of the 5 you normally work. If there happens to be a holiday on that Monday, well, now you're only on paid leave for Tuesday. So we would pay you 1/5 of a paid leave of the full week benefit. The key to that is we would change the number of days that you were eligible for paid leave, but we wouldn't adjust your schedule. In other words, in that scenario I just mentioned, you would receive 1/5 of a payment, not 1/4, because we don't remove Monday entirely. We just move it from the days that paid leave is eligible. If you like looking at things in math terms, it's like we remove the numerator, we change the numerator, but don't touch the denominator. Or if you think about it just in words, it's the days in which you are eligible for paid leave may be adjusted, but your regular schedule does not change. That is our belief. That's how FMLA works. Not a ton of guidance. This might be one of the better places for guidance going forward as far as how this works and the calculation works, but it is in line with how FMLA applies. And then obviously there's the category of individuals who normally work on holidays or shutdowns. They would have been expected to work had they not been on paid leave. In those cases, in that case, there's no change to the paid leave benefit amount that's payable. And then we even allow them, should they get additional holiday pay or pay that's not tied to wages, we would not consider that concurrent payment with our paid leave because it's not replacing the same income we are, and therefore we would allow them to receive it without it affecting their paid leave benefit. And as I sort of mentioned, we included scenarios in this policy language. We felt that was very helpful, particularly for this type of situation. We've received a lot of questions about how holidays work from employers, from employees. It's one of our more common questions, so we felt like it was necessary to add, it would be helpful at least to add scenarios, add examples for each scenario. Last category of policy changes involves the transition rules between the public program and then private plans. Some of this has already been in place for the transitions that happened in the beginning of the second quarter in April, and then even the beginning of this quarter in July, when private plans started up and there were individuals who were covered under our program for a while. We haven't yet had the reverse situation yet happen, but it will eventually. The general rule for all transitions is that open claims, we expect them to terminate from the original plan on the date of the transition, and then be eligible to be refiled with the new carrier. By open claims, we mean anytime the benefit amount payable prior to the transition, it's still payable during the transition and into the new program. So kind of the original owner of the claim would handle it till transition date, and then the new kind of person providing coverage would handle it from that point on. And then individuals can request documents from the original claim submission and use them in the subsequent claim submission to ease that transition. Then we have a couple sets of rules that are specific to the direction that the plan is going, whether it's going from the public program to the private plan. The first set is for the going from our program to a private plan. So this is what we've actually gone through a couple of times already. One rule we felt was necessary was, or would be useful, is former employees as the data transition would not have to have their claims terminated, would not necessarily have to be covered under the private plan. This could be either because they filed their initial paid leave, after they'd already been terminated and they were within that 12-week period in which they could file under the public program. Or it could be that they filed their claim while they were still employed. Their FMLA may have run out mid paid leave claim, and now they've been terminated, but they're still under the paid leave claim. Similar situation, if they're not employed by the employer at the time of the transition, would not force them to go to the private plan. One thing to note here is we do need notice. We might necessarily know at that time whether they're employed still. We probably would in that first scenario where they already were unemployed at the time they filed, but in the second scenario, they may not have told us. We do reach out to employers and insurers and the individuals to let them know about this change. So that's an opportunity for them to provide that notice, but we would need to receive that in order to avoid terminating them on our side, because the expectation would be that they'd be under the private plan. The second category involves whether the private plans can reduce their allotment of paid leave based on past paid leave used under the public program. We do allow them to do that, but they're not required to. It would be a choice that the private plan makes. If they do make the choice to kind of reduce benefits on the data transition based on time taken prior to the transition, two rules apply. One, it has to be paid leave taken from that specific employer. If the employee has multiple employers or had a prior employer that they took leave from and then changed jobs, they cannot use time that was not taken from the private plan employer. The second rule is the time must be part of the 12-month period that the new private plan utilizes. So as an example, if the new private plan utilizes the calendar year method for determining the 12-month period and the transition happens on January 1st, well, then they can't use any past time because any past time would have been taken in the prior calendar year. The other thing to note is we won't have the ability to provide significant detail about the amount of leave used for each employer. So we're just going to be able to provide the same notice we normally provide. The amount of payment, the approved period of time, the employer, if they are looking to reduce paid leave based on prior usage, needs to work that out with the individual employee and confirm that it's actually time taken from them, not taken from other employers. That's kind of the category for the transition from public to private. The opposite, when a private plan terminates and the employer comes back to the public program, we have a few other rules. One is just noting that the transitioning claims will use the public program plan design. It won't keep any enhanced benefits that may have been available under the private plan. So as an example, if the private plan provided 100% wage replacement, when that claim transitions to the public program, they would have to revert to our standard 95%, 60% formula that we use for every other claim. So they might notice a difference in their payment when it transitions. Similarly, we would recalculate the paid leaves to account for all employers under the public program at that time. This should be somewhat narrow, but an example is if an employee had two jobs, one under the private plan, one under the public program, and was on paid leave for both of them at the same time, they would, for a period of time, they would have separate checks, separate claims, separate benefit amounts, kind of independent claims. And then if the private plan terminates, those claims would kind of be merged into one. And from that point forward, we would readjust to account for their schedule for both employers, their benefit amounts for both employers. We wouldn't go back and look at the private plan usage, but we would look at their current schedule and current employers. To help ease in that transition, we may request at the time of the transition, any open claims, the employer to provide us employment verification forms. Basically, they're part of the process up front, rather than asking each individual employee to go and contact their employer one at a time and provide that information to us. In addition, we're open to other options rather than forms being completed. For example, if you have a number of employees, providing a spreadsheet with all the information that would be found on the form, providing that to us would be an option we'd look at to help ease that burden both for employers and employees and make that transition as easy as possible. The last item to note, and last actually policy presenting today, is paid leave utilization under the private plan. When they transition to the public program, we're basically going to ignore that. We did look into whether we could take into account that history of usage and kind of deduct it from their present and future usage. It's possible, but it's an administrative nightmare, to put it lightly. Both administrative, IT, probably prone to errors. We just felt like it wasn't worth it at the end of the day to take into account private usage. So essentially, we would ignore any time used under the private plan when that employee comes to the public program. So once that possibly fast, ultimately we want to, our recommendation is to have these posted for public comment, but I would be happy to answer any questions about anything, either the intent or the language that we request to establish that intent.
Michael, thank you so much. That was really complex information and you really presented it very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone have questions? Open for discussion. Okay, so we'll move right along. May I have a motion to grant the staff permission to post the proposed policy revisions for public comment?
Mike, so moved.
Thank you, Mike.
Daryl, second.
Thank you, Daryl, for second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We're going to keep this moving. Jennifer, would you kindly provide the update on fund recovery?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Simpson, and I'm the contribution examiner at the authority. I do have a slide that we can share.
And please let me know if you do not see it.
We can see your screen, Walter.
Okay, perfect. So we have been working to identify accounts that were showing as non-compliant within the Connecticut Paid Leave Program, as they had not reported any contributions, and we were able to split the accounts into two categories. The first category is for accounts that were batch enrolled by a third-party administrator, or TPA, and accounts that were self-enrolled or self-registered by the employers. For the first set of batch enrolled accounts serviced by a TPA, we sent out 5,117 mailers at the end of April to identified non-compliant accounts. To date, we have received contribution payments on 676 of these accounts for a total of $849,843 and change. We also did receive additional information from 543 accounts confirming that they were either registered in error by the TPA or that they were not eligible to participate in the program because they didn't meet the established criteria. For our second set, the self-registered accounts, we sent out a total of 1,896 mailers at the end of May. And to date, we've received contribution payments for 247 accounts for an amount of $215,376 and change. We also did receive information on an additional 110 accounts that advised that they were not eligible to participate in the program based on the established criteria. And we did also hear from sole proprietors and self-employed individuals that reached out to let us know they wanted to opt out of the program because they did not realize that their involvement was optional. So with this information, it shows that our total contributions to date received from previously identified non-compliant accounts is a little over $1,065,000. Any questions?
Thank you, Jennifer. I didn't know if that was it or not. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Andrea, did you raise your hand?
I did not. That was the applause reaction because I don't know if there's an appreciation for how much work Jennifer put in and that she essentially collected $1 million that we hadn't seen before from non-compliant employers. And she's still working through that backlog of the remaining employers that the mailers went out to and they still haven't responded. So there's more to come. And that was why when I was making my presentation earlier, I said, we really need to get her that software, because if she can accomplish this with mailers and manual tracking, we can only imagine what she can do with some automated help. So congratulations, Jennifer, and thank you very much. I appreciate
Andrea,
it.
thank you for jumping in and sharing that bit of detail. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jennifer. That's a lot of money. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, John, you are up next. Would you kindly provide an update on the claims administration process?
Thank you, Fran. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, you are.
I'm going to share my screen.
We can see your screen, John.
Thank you. Okay, so claims data as of August 11th, claims filed as of August 8th is 61,000. And bear with me for a moment. The top of my screen is cut off a little bit here. So and 61.9 and change. Whether I can scrunch this to, excuse me. Just go back one. And claims intake for July was 7,366, and the amount in for August through the 8th was 2,361. And claims received and status, all approved claims at 32,072 at 52% rate of approval, and denied claims at 19,275 with a 31% rate of denial. Pending claims at 6,449, 10%. And statistics excluding the 5,409 COVID claims that we received, looking at the approved and denied claims, once those are removed from the totals, we have 31,255 approved claims, which represents a 55% rate of approval, and denied claims at 14,683 at 26% denial rate. And then claims by reason, you can see the monthly numbers. So employees' own illness or injury is again by far the largest category, followed by pregnancy, childbirth, and then bonding and care of a family member. And then the additional categories here are significantly lower. As you can see, the adoption and other categories here. And demographics, claims by age group. Again, the 26 to 41 is by far the largest category, followed by 42 to 57 and 58 to 76. And then claims by gender, we again see that female claims are outpacing male claims by over 2 to 1. And these are cumulative for the whole, all of the intake of claims from inception. And a little more detailed claims by age group and leave reason. And again, you can see that the own injury and illness is by far the largest category. And then you can also see the age ranges here. The 26 to 41 is the largest category, and the 42 to 57 is the largest category as well. Second largest category. And leave reason by gender. Again, own injury illness is significantly higher than the other categories, followed by bonding and pregnancy, and then caregiver. And broken down by continuous, intermittent, or reduced schedule. The continuous leave is by far the greatest, followed by intermittent, and then reduced schedule is significantly lighter claim load. And the top 10 towns by utilization rate. Looking at that, not much has changed here, a little jockeying for position at the bottom here, but again, we have an interesting mix of rural, suburban, and some urban areas mixed into the data there as well. And these are all rated on the claims per 10,000 residents in each of these towns as well. And that's through the end of July. Then approved to date by leave reason. So you can see the largest category is the own health category, followed by bonding and pregnancy, which collectively makes up a significant portion of approved claims. It's about 47% of approved claims between bonding and pregnancy, and then care of a family member as well. And then some statistics on the call center data, which we have trended out here starting with April and included April, May, June, and July information here. And the information is total calls, the percent answered in 30 seconds, the abandonment rate on that first slide on your left, and then on the slide on your right, it illustrates the hold time and handle time under various scenarios. So initial hold and then max initial hold time, as well as the average handle time. Okay, and approvals through August 6th, we have a total of 227,943 payments released to a total of 25,730 unique employees, and covering 1.3 million total days paid, and the total gross payments through August 6th, 125,321. And then looking at the amounts of these payments as well, we're currently in a little bit of a transition with respect to the fact that claims that are being paid, some of which were started in the prior quarter and prior to the minimum wage increase, and then now we're also beginning to pay claims at the higher rate, in that the claim first date of leave would have commenced either July 1st or later, and is subject to the higher benefit rate as a result of the minimum wage increase. And as you can see, that 53% are at or above the maximum rate of benefit, and then so on down the scale here, for an average daily amount of $97.30. And then statistics down here just with respect to the type of payment, and it's been running like this for some time now, about 90, 10, 89, 11 here for the direct deposit versus debit card. And that concludes the claims presentation for this month. Any questions?
Thank you, Jen.
Sorry, go ahead, Fran.
No, go ahead. I'm good.
I just had one quick question, and I apologize if I just missed this. I know we've talked a number of times about what percentage of completed claims are being denied. Do we know what the numbers are on that recently? I know the cumulative numbers have a little bit of a skew because there were a bunch of early non-serious COVID claims, but do we have a sense of sort of like run rate, what percentage of claims are being denied?
I would say at this point, so the other thing that we could do here as well, and it might provide a little bit more clarity, is to remove the pending claims number out of there as well. And I could certainly provide those numbers to you after the call and or include it on the slide deck here for you. When you look at the net rate after those COVID claims, you can see the differential here in that the approved claim rate is 55 and the denied claim rate is 26. And once we remove the pending claims out of that as well, both of those numbers will tend to increase somewhat. And I can certainly extract that info and get it to you and or provide it on this slide deck if you would like me to follow up with that.
That would be great. And especially these are cumulative numbers, right?
That's correct.
It might be helpful to also just have like for the most recent month or whatever is a reasonable time period, since I think our sense was that some of the early data might not be representative of what's happening now.
So one of the other issues with that is just in terms of the length of time that it takes to approve a claim. So in terms of intake coming in, we might not have tons of data with respect to claims that have just been taken in with regard to approval denial, as the process time, depending upon when somebody filed, et cetera. So that's the only issue with respect to that, but we could certainly take a look at that and see what we can do for you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is a little bit more in depth. I was wondering if there's a way to identify from the denied claims, what % of those denied claims identify as claims that would fall under injury, surgery versus claims that would fall under other categories. The reason I'm curious is when I would do traditional FMLA representation claims for work, there was a higher percentage that I dealt with of denials from employer side when there were application or confusion in applications for a family member rather than injury versus sickness. And I'm wondering if those trends transfer over into these statistics. Just curious.
So we could certainly break it down by leave type if that's what you're driving at there. And then the other piece of the puzzle is with regard to overall denial statistics. The largest category of denial by far, running at about 79% at this point, is that requested documentation was not received. And then followed by other categories of denial that are significantly lower. You drop off down to 3%, 3%, 3% for the next several. But we could certainly produce a list of those as well that illustrate the reasons for denial. And as I said, almost 80% at this point, 79% are for requested documentation not received.
So just to jump in, Eva, are you asking for reason for denial, or are you asking for denials based on leave reason?
Leave denials based on leave reason.
Yeah, okay. We can do
reason for
that.
denial, very different. Thank you for the distinction.
Yeah, I think we have that ability to run that, right, John?
We do. Yes,
Okay.
we do. We can produce that for you, Eva.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the questions and the dialogue.
Thank you.
Jessica and Jacqueline, would you kindly provide the portal project outreach and engagement and legislative updates?
Yes, thank you, Fran. Pull up my slides.
We can see your screen, Jess.
Thank you. All right, in terms of our program metric updates, as of Monday of this week, we have almost 141,000 businesses registered. We saw an increase of nearly 2,000 from our last reporting. Just shy of 700 third-party administrators who are registered. Contributions received or in transit, over 624 million. Our private plans, this data remains unchanged from last month's report, 595 approved private plans. That's an increase of 4 effective as of 10/1, and this covers approximately 39,000 Connecticut workers. Our Contact Us Center with United Way, they currently have 386 open Contact Us inquiries. They had 358 new ones created this month. They closed 431, and that brings their total since September of 2020 to over 40,000. I just wanted to add as a separate note, we've been doing a survey with United Way with the contact us specialists, and the feedback has been extremely positive. People are just have wonderful things to say about the professionalism, the knowledge, the speed of getting responses. So I just wanted to share that because I think that they are a great representation of the authority, and I wanted to acknowledge that. And then we have our internal team of small business support and benefits advisors who are also doing incredible work. They have 64 open cases right now, 73 new ones this month, 81 that they closed this month, and their total has just surpassed 1,700 since January. So they too are doing a fantastic job, and we get really great feedback about their responsiveness. And the total number of workers covered by Connecticut paid leave stands at 1.6 million based on first quarter DOL data. In terms of our portal activities on the employer registration and contribution side, our production support continues as always. As you heard from Andrea, the development for fund recovery is underway. We have a solution that's been selected for facilitating private plan audits. And lastly, and I think most excitingly, we are kicking off our redesign and replatform of our website. We actually had a kickoff meeting with the vendor this week. The redesign is meant to improve navigation and accommodate expanded content, as we are now obviously in a much different place than we were in September of 2020 when the website was initially developed. And then the replatforming will allow us to have greater integration with other state IT assets. It'll allow us to provide translation for many different languages, and it will be easier, we think, for our constituents to use in the end. So that's expected to be about a 6-month process, and we'll keep you updated as we work through it. And then on the benefits and claims administration side, working on integrating AFLAC claim employer and payment data into our Connecticut paid leave platform. Switching gears to our outreach and engagement updates. I've been showing you this slide for the past couple of months. I find it very interesting to look at the trends, so just wanted to continue to provide that. You can see that we did have a spike in July in all of the different categories. And we saw that spike in April as well. And I would attribute that to the end of the grace period. So to additional employers going and making their contribution payments. Our cumulative for January through July of this year, we have surpassed 500,000 users, over 1.3 million sessions, 4.65 million page views. And we see that they're looking at 3.49 pages per session and staying for over 3 minutes per session. So I like to monitor that just to make sure we're continuing to engage people. To the higher usage time shows me that they are finding the information useful, and they're delving in, and they're not just going to one page and then they're done. They're really having that journey through the website to get more information about the program. I wanted to share a snapshot of our upcoming events just over the next 3 months. We're really ramping up. We're going to be very busy out and about. So we were up in Newington last week. The AARP allowed us to participate in a caregiver program that they held. We will be doing a back to school rally in New Haven in coordination with one of our radio partners, where backpacks and school supplies are handed out to New Haven public school children. We did that last year. We were able to speak to a lot of parents, and that was really great. And then a new event for us this year will be at the New London Pride Festival, which is at Ocean Beach in New London in 2 weeks. So reaching out to that LGBTQ audience. In September, we will be at the Stanford Health and Wellness Expo. This is also an event we did last year that we felt was very useful in our reach out. And through our connection with Commissioner Sadi, we are going to be at the Stand Down for Veterans and Active Duty Military event, which is going to be held at the end of this month at 5 different locations throughout the state, which will be a great way for us to continue to connect with military personnel and families. And then in October, the Women's Better Living Expo in Bridgeport, the Making Strides Against Breast Cancer Walk in Hartford, and a Halloween event that we did with one of our radio partners last year that was also very helpful. So as you can see, we are going to be busy, we're going to be out there, and we will, continue to seek out events that help us connect in person with our constituents. Also just wanted to provide an update on the employee reimbursement outreach that we've been doing. I know this has been discussed at previous board meetings. We've been using our social media and our email newsletters to communicate to individuals and employers that if they have employees or if they as an employee worked 2 jobs last year, we'd like them to check and make sure that they did not over contribute to the program. And if they did, we do have a way for them to request a refund. So the newsletter screenshot that you see on the right is something that I put together with Marta and Walter from our finance team, and they will be going out next Tuesday. And the specific target for this is healthcare employers. We know that they may be likely to have doctors, nurses, et cetera, who might work for more than one employer and who might also be higher wage earners. So we're taking this approach of targeting specific categories of employers and hoping that they can help us spread that word to their employees to make that check. Next, newsletter communication update. 3 newsletters went out in the month of July, one for TPAs, one sort of what I call general market for all our registered users, and then one specifically for human resources. Very pleased to report that the open rates hover between 35 and 40%, which is really fantastic for me to see. That it means we are getting information to people that they're interested in, that they're using, and we're providing enough new content that they do keep opening our emails and using them as a resource month after month. And then lastly, I'd like to use this as a segue to have Jacqueline jump in. We are continuing our media tour, and we have some exciting news for our next sort of chapter of that. So Jacqueline, if you'd like to jump in, I'd love to have you discuss it.
Sure. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, we're very excited to be partnering with Senator Blumenthal's office on this. We are doing some outreach and hoping to be visiting on the 23rd, which is not that far away, which is kind of crazy. But Andrea and Senator Blumenthal, we're working on lining up visits with the Connecticut Mirror and doing an interview with WNPR. And I've also reached out to Fox 61 to do a television segment. So we will let you know once that's all booked and where you can keep your eyes peeled to see that. As you probably recall, we had a wonderful event with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro doing radio, print, and TV broadcast. So, and Jessica and our communications consultant, Carter Johnson, have been doing amazing work on pushing this out. So we're very excited to be doing this, and it's helping to elevate Connecticut paid leave. So we're excited to be talking about what's going on nationally as well. So that's really good stuff. I've been working on that with Jess and Carter, and I've also been working with Aaron on, Jess, are you done? Okay.
I am, yes. Thank you.
Thanks. And just to let you know, Aaron and I have been doing a lot of large employer outreach just to help the process to go more smoothly for workers, just understanding how they do their human resources organization and helping to bridge any gaps with forms or contacts, so that when workers approach us and they don't know where to go, we're helping to direct them, and also looking at our forms to see how it makes it a little bit easier for them to understand the information we're looking for. So that's been really successful. Today we meet with Comcast. We've met with Walmart, Stop and Shop, AT&T, and I believe Amazon is going to be coming up soon, and I'm hoping Apple, we can get them. Those just seem to be the employers where we're having a lot of disconnects just in terms of worker and employer. So, and I just thought I'd also share, I didn't have it up fast enough for when John was talking about the claims, the Google Map link, just for everybody see. It's, very similar to what we have been seeing in trends. The western part of the state, not as much usage as the eastern part of the state. So I hope you like the colors and get a real good sense of, Canaan still. I don't know what's going on in Canaan, but it's a place unto itself. And maybe when Ava gets elected to the state senate, she could do a lot more good work there in the northwest corner. So that's all I have. But if there's any questions, I'm here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
I actually have a question, and I don't know if it's really relevant to our work, but it would be interesting information to me. I would love to understand the demographics in those communities where we have the highest concentration of usage. I think that would be super, super interesting. And I know we have gender, but I would be very interested in the demographics. Not to put any more work on anybody's plate, just curiosity, really. I don't know if there's a story to be told there, but I'd be very interested in it. Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much for that report, Jessica and Jacqueline. Committee chairs, you're up next. We'll start with you, Daryl.
Thank you. Again, good morning. And the Policy and Personnel Committee met. And we talked about the revisions to the policies, the 3 that were discussed earlier, which are going for public comment. There were other discussions around. Excellent. And the other discussion around the authority bylaws, which will be more to come and presented to the board at a future date. And that was our basis of our committee meeting.
Thanks, Daryl. Molly?
I can be extra speedy. We had a meeting. We heard a lot of the same updates you just heard from Jessica. So if there are no questions for her, I think we have now covered the update from Outreach and Education.
All right, excellent. Well done. We're keeping this moving. We have 20 minutes. Finance and Audit, Dave?
Yes, good morning. Holly was unavailable today at the Finance Committee meeting. We discussed the actuarial analysis that was done by Spring that everyone saw today. And we also went over the financials that I will be giving an overview in the interest of time. Everyone can see my screen?
We can see.
Okay,
Yep.
So for the month of June, the authority spent almost $2.9 million, and the major categories there were IT support, salaries and related expenses, contact center, and grievance adjudication with the Department of Labor. We also had some unused seed funds that we repaid back to the state because we owe the money back. So we were able to do that instead of using money from the contribution funds to pay it back. So that was a plus. Cumulatively, the authority has spent almost $28.3 million to date, $15.2 million in the current fiscal year. Again, it was the typical categories and the employee contribution system, salaries and related expenses, post-production support, outreach, and our support teams is what the authority is spending money on. Regarding bond funds, we do have over $16 million allocated and made available to us now. That includes the $3.8 million that was approved by the Bond Commission in May, and the state of Connecticut formally made it available in June. To date, the authority has spent $4.8 million of that money. The authority has spent $11.2 million of that money, with $4.8 million available for future spending. In terms of contributions for the month of June, we got almost $800,000 of contributions, and we paid out $27.1 million in claims benefits. There were actually 5 weeks of benefits paid as opposed to the normal 4. So that's why that amount is a little higher. The closing balance of the fund on a cash basis is over $383 million as of the end of June. And also I wanted to mention that Aflac, we had an impressed account with Aflac, which previously had $20 million based on our activity. They lowered the amount that was required to be in the account. So that was lowered from 20 to 12. So they returned back $8 million to the authority. Through June, we have collected $518.7 million in contributions. Like I mentioned, on an annual basis, that's $412.3 million that we collected in the current fiscal year, $102.7 million in benefits to date. And again, the ending balance is over $383 million as of the end of June. In July, no really big surprises there. The authority spent $836,000, most of that which was for salaries and benefits. That number looks a little higher than usual because we had 3 pay periods. Claims and benefits paid for the month of July was $20.2 million. That's about the current run rate so far on a monthly basis, over $20 million. Although in recent weeks, we've been starting to see a slight uptick in that. And through the end of July, our contributions were $623.4 million. For the quarter, we had collected over $107 million. So it was a good quarter, and we're pleased at the progress so far. Those are our results for June and a preview of July. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dave. Looking good. Okay, thank you very much. Andrea, would you please provide your report?
Yes, thank you. So I have a few things. First, last week I was able to attend the Disability Management Employer Conference, where we gave a presentation regarding how we were able to stand up the authority in a pandemic. There's an enormous, still 2 years later, there's an enormous amount of interest around this and admiration. I would say that we received a lot of compliments about the way our program is designed, the way it works, and we had an opportunity to offer advice to other states who are either contemplating a paid leave statute or in the process of building their program now. Next is that Erin will be sending a link and some information to the board to engage in online ethics training. It's just a good practice, actually best practice that we do this periodically, and it's been some time since we've done that. We do this regularly at the authority, so please keep an eye out for that. Thirdly, the Office of Public Accounts has notified us, I think 2 Fridays ago, that we are subject to an audit. So we are preparing for that now. We are being completely cooperative, providing with all the documentation that they need, and we will just let you know how that's progressing and what the outcome of that will be. And then finally, this is really a sad note, and some of you may not know, but there was a gentleman named Deb Samgupta who worked at DAS in IT. Unfortunately, Deb passed away this week. He was really instrumental in helping us to stand up the authority. I honestly say we could not have done this without him. When it was just Chris Floyd and I, we had no idea about what to do in state government. We didn't have any clue generally about how to proceed. And Deb was incredibly patient and kind. And he would call us and make offers to add us to, let's say, the purchase of licenses that he may have already been making for teams or something else he knew that we would need. So we would buy it at the state rate rather than on our own. And he was just incredibly supportive. And it is just a terrible shock that we've lost him. But I wanted the board to know that and to acknowledge the contribution that he's made to make our authority what it is. And we are just devastated to have lost him. And that actually, Fran, is the extent of my report today. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you so much for sharing us. That's indeed sad news, but thank you for sharing that with us. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Okay, I actually have some new business. Andrea, would you like to share? Yeah. Okay, so I'm sad to say that Daryl will be leaving the board of Connecticut Paid Family Leave. Daryl, thank you so much for all of your work in helping get this organization to, on its sea legs from the very early days, and certainly getting us standing up this organization during the pandemic. So thank you so much. We will definitely be missing you. Ellen McKittrick will be taking his place. Ellen, I hope I didn't butcher your name there. McKittrick, Ellen McKittrick, thank you. So welcome, Ellen, and happy to have you join us.
Nice to meet everybody.
Daryl, do you have any parting words to share?
Thank you so much, Fran. And it's bittersweet, but you're in very good hands with Attorney Ellen. It was an amazing opportunity to be part of such a wonderful group. I want to say I learned from all of you, and I will take what I've learned and using it in my future. But I want to say that I'm so proud of all the work that was done. It was incredible. It is the best in the country from my perspective, from what I see, and it's because all of you and the great leadership. So again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm very proud of where we are, and I know you're in good hands, and I wish everybody extreme health and well. And Andrea, I'm so sad to hear about Deb, and it's very, very sad, but take care, everyone.
Thank you so much, Daryl. You'll be missed. Ellen, welcome to you. You're joining a great team under great leadership for a really fabulous organization that consists of a very, very passionate team and a very passionate board. So thank you and welcome.
I'm excited to contribute.
Okay. I think we are 10 minutes ahead of time, which is a good thing. Does anybody have any other new business that they would like to share? Any other comments?
I just wanted to give a shout out to Daryl. In the very beginnings of everything getting together, it was just us three with Andrea and Aaron and Chris. It was bare bones, and Daryl, you were one of the backbones. You did a lot of work, and I don't think you give yourself enough credit. You're a very modest and humble guy, and you will be missed. So
thank you, Ava.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Fran, there was one other thing that I wanted to mention. That we have a lot of reports to do as an agency, and there's, even though you just received the annual report, there's another shorter report that's due statutorily on September 1. So we'll be circulating that. It really is it's pro forma, our financials, the number of people that work here and the like. So you'll be getting that as a board, and then you'll be asked for comments, and then we'll get it to the right reporting authorities by September 1st. And I will be on vacation next week. I think you should know that too. Right? And I'll be back on the 22nd.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Daryl, second.
Thank you, Daryl. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Have a wonderful summer, everyone. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Goodbye, everyone.